Some folk are simply born lucky. Toss them off a cliff and they'll land in a haystack, whistling. Their geese are swans, their cards are trumps, and whatever the world may think, they never lose a wink of sleep over it. Meet Hans, the luckiest fool who ever walked a country road. For 7 long years he'd scrubbed, hauled, and sweated for his master, until one bright morning he stretched his aching back and said, "Master, my time's up. My old mother's waiting, so pay me my wages and let me go." His master smiled, reached behind the counter, and handed him a lump of silver as big as his head. Hans wrapped the shining lump in his handkerchief, slung it over his shoulder, and trudged off down the road, one weary foot dragging after the other. The silver was heavy as a sleeping ox, and his poor neck ached something dreadful. Just then a rider came trotting by, easy as a king upon his throne, bouncing along without a single care in the world. "Now there's the life," sighed Hans, loud enough to wake the dead. "No stones to stub your toes, no shoe leather worn to rags, you simply sit and let the beast do all the labouring." The horseman reined in, grinning down at the sweating, staggering fellow and his enormous glinting bundle. "Why walk, friend?" said the horseman, "when you might ride?" "Ah, but I've this dreadful load," groaned Hans, patting his silver. "It's crushing my poor shoulder to powder." "Then let's trade," said the rider, quick as a wink. "My horse for your little bundle. Fair's fair." Hans could scarcely believe his ears. "You're too kind, mind. It's a weary weight to lug about." But the deal was struck, the silver handed over, and Hans hoisted proudly up into the saddle. "When you fancy going fast," said the man, pocketing the lump, "just smack your lips and holler, Jip." Then off he strolled, whistling, the silver tucked under his arm. Hans sat tall in the saddle, squared his elbows, turned out his toes, and cracked the whip like a lord surveying his lands. "No care and no sorrow, a fig for the morrow," he sang, delightfully off-key. But trotting soon felt far too slow for such a fine gentleman, so he smacked his lips and bellowed, "Jip!" The horse laid back its ears and bolted like a thunderbolt. In half a heartbeat, Hans was sailing through the air and landed flat on his back in a muddy ditch, seeing little birds and stars. The runaway horse would have vanished forever had a passing shepherd not caught its bridle. Hans peeled himself out of the mud, groaning and dripping. "Riding's no joke," he grumbled, "when the brute flings you off and ruins your best coat in a puddle that smells nothing like roses." He eyed the shepherd's plump cow, ambling along so calm and comfortable. "Now that's a proper companion, milk, butter and cheese every blessed day, and never a gallop in her." "If you're so taken with her," said the shepherd kindly, "I'll swap my cow for your horse. I do love helping a neighbour, even at my own loss." "Done," cried Hans. What a generous soul, he thought, as the shepherd rode merrily away. Hans brushed the mud from his coat, wiped his face, and ambled off behind his new cow, prouder than a peacock. "A bit of bread's all I need," he told himself, "with butter and cheese to spread on it, and milk whenever my throat runs dry. What more could a man possibly want?" At the next inn he stopped, ate every last crumb of his bread, and cheerfully spent his final penny on a glass of beer. Then on he wandered toward his mother's village, the cow plodding faithfully behind. The sun climbed higher, the road stretched longer, and a great dusty heath spread out before him. By noon the heat was fierce, and the heath went on for miles. Hans's tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth like an old boot. "No matter," he thought, brightening. "I'll simply milk my cow and drink my fill." So he tied her to a withered stump, crouched beneath her with his leather cap held ready, and pulled and squeezed and coaxed. Not one single drop came out, not A dribble. The cow that was to shower him with milk and butter and cheese was as dry as the dusty road itself, a small detail Hans had somehow never once thought to check. The cow, growing weary of Hans's fumbling, decided she'd had quite enough and delivered a kick to his head that laid him flat and senseless in the dust. When he blinked awake, a burly butcher stood over him, wheeling a fine fat pig in a barrow. Hans moaned out his sorry tale of the milkless cow. "That old thing?" laughed the butcher. "She's fit for nothing but the pot. What a swindle!" groaned Hans. "A dry cow for my fine horse. Now a pig makes proper sausages." "To please a neighbour," said the butcher, "I'll trade my pig for your cow." Hans nearly wept with gratitude. So off jogged Hans, leading his splendid pig by a string, certain that fortune smiled on him at last. What could possibly go wrong with such a fat companion trotting at his heels? Presently he met a wiry countryman cradling a snowy white goose beneath his arm. They fell to chatting, and Hans, bursting with pride, recounted every one of his marvellous bargains. The countryman hefted his goose. "Feel the weight of her 8 weeks old and dripping with fat. Whoever roasts her will dine like a king." "Fine," said Hans, "but my pig's no scrap of a thing either." At that, the countryman's cheerful face went suddenly grave. The countryman shook his head slowly. "Friend, you seem an honest sort, so I'll warn you. The squire in the next village had a pig stolen clean out of his sty, and that pig of yours gives me a terrible fright. If they catch you with it, they'll toss you head first into the horse pond. Can you swim?" Poor Hans went white as chalk. "Good man, save me from this mess. Take the pig, give me your goose, and let's say no more about it." The countryman sighed as though sorely put upon, then took the string and drove the pig off down a side path, chuckling all the way. Hans hugged the white goose to his chest and marched on, merry as ever. "What a clever bargain," he chuckled. "That fellow was fairly taken in. First, there'll be a splendid roast, then goose grease to last me 6 whole months, and best of all these lovely white feathers." He stroked them lovingly. "I'll stuff them into my pillow and sleep like a baby, no rocking needed. How happy my dear mother will be. A pig? Pah! Give me a fat white goose any day." And so he strolled toward the next village, feathers tickling his chin, whistling a tune the birds themselves might envy. In the village square, a scissor grinder sat at his spinning wheel, sharpening a blade and singing. "O'er hill and o'er dale, so happy I roam, work light and live well, all the world is my home." Hans stopped to listen, quite enchanted. "You must be a happy man indeed," he said, "so merry at your labour." "Aye," said the grinder, sparks flying from his stone. "Mine's a golden trade, a good grinder never dips his hand in his pocket without pulling out coin. But tell me, wherever did you get that handsome goose?" Hans, only too glad, launched at once into his whole glorious history. A pig for the goose, a cow for the pig, a horse for the cow, and silver for the horse, 7 years' honest labour for the silver. "You've done wondrous well," said the grinder, stroking his chin. "But imagine finding money in your pocket every time you reached in. Turn grinder like me. All you need is a stone, and here's a fine one, barely worn, yours for that goose alone. The happiest man alive," cried Hans, thrusting the goose forward. The grinder handed him a rough, heavy lump of rock. "Work it well, and you'll sharpen an old nail as keen as a razor." Hans hoisted the grindstone onto his shoulder and set off, eyes sparkling. "Surely I was born under a lucky star," he sighed happily. Everything I wish for simply drops into my lap, and folks seem downright grateful to make me rich." But the stone was cruelly heavy, and Hans had eaten his last crumb and spent his last penny hours ago. His stomach growled, his arms trembled, and each step grew heavier than the last. On and on he trudged, the stone dragging at him like an anchor, until at last, half-starved and staggering, he could not carry the wretched thing another single stride. Spying a river glinting cool and clear, Hans stumbled to its grassy bank to rest and drink. Carefully, oh, so very carefully, he set the great stone down at the water's edge. Then he knelt, cupped his hands, and leaned out for a long, blessed drink. His elbow gave the stone the tiniest nudge. It wobbled, it teetered, it tipped, and with a mighty plop, it rolled clean off the bank and vanished into the deep. Hans watched it sink through the clear green water, down and down, until it was gone from sight entirely, swallowed up forever by the cold running river. And what did Hans do? He leapt to his feet and danced for joy. Down he fell upon his knees, tears of gladness in his eyes, thanking heaven for so kindly lifting that dreadful heavy stone from his weary hands. "Was ever a man so lucky as me?" he cried up to the empty sky. Then, light as a feather and free as a bird, with no silver, no horse, no cow, no pig, no goose, and not a single penny to his name, Hans skipped the last mile home and told his astonished mother what a wonderfully easy road it was to perfect happiness.